There's something unsettling about lighthouses. Maybe it's the isolation. Maybe it's the way their lights cut through the darkness like a warning no one ever heeds. Or maybe it's what waits inside when the light stops turning. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a true story, one that has haunted me ever since I stepped foot inside an abandoned lighthouse, where something still watches from the top, and once you hear it, you'll never look at a lonely coastal tower the same way again. On a rugged cliffside, battered by the endless tantrums of the Atlantic, where waves crash like screams against ancient stone and salt stings like the breath of the dead, stands a lighthouse forgotten by time and government, a skeletal tower that once saved lives but now swallows them. This is where I found myself when I answered a quiet government contract last year to survey old, decommissioned coastal sites for potential historic renovation. I was between jobs, desperate, and newly divorced, thinking a week alone by the sea might offer peace. But I learned quickly that the sea has no peace to give, and this particular lighthouse, officially unnamed, just referred to as Beacon 137, carried a reputation like seaweed, tangled around the ankles of those who dared step foot near it, with the locals warning me in brittle voices never to stay after sundown, speaking of the crying in the lens room and the men who never left. But I, in my rational, city-dulled arrogance, brushed it off as folklore, even after I noticed that every one of the surrounding homes had their windows facing away from the tower, like even architecture refused to acknowledge it. The first night, I brought my gear and sat maps, journals, a few old coastal records, my camera, a sleeping bag, and ascended the spiraling staircase that groaned like something alive, each step coated in dust and small feathers, though no birds ever flew near. And when I reached the top, I found the massive Fresnel lens still intact, but cold, like it hadn't seen light since the war years, and etched into the rusted railing were names dozens of them, all scratched with desperate hand into the metal, some fresh enough to still flake. That night, as the sky bled into a bruise of storm clouds and lightning rolled miles offshore, I slept fitfully by the fire I made in the old keeper's kitchen, dreaming of water pouring endlessly into my lungs, of tall men with lanterns for heads, and a child's voice counting backward from 10 in a language I didn't recognize. And when I woke, every cabinet and drawer had been opened, their contents splayed out as if someone had been searching for something, and a wet trail of footprints lead from the front door to the stairs and stop it as though whoever made them vanished in mid-step. I should have left then, but I told myself it was a prank, some bored local kids messing with the outsider, even though I'd locked the doors from the inside, and the nearest house was a mile away. So I stayed, foolishly, and spent the second day researching the site, uncovering only cryptic mentions of lightkeeper discrepancies and mental disruptions among staff buried in military documentation, which had all been heavily redacted. And in an archived newspaper clipping from 1956, I found a disturbing note. Last keeper claimed the tower was an eye, always watching, always weeping, and the accompanying photo showed a man with dark stains under his eyes, staring straight into the camera, like he knew something it couldn't capture that night. The storm finally came, a vicious, howling force that seemed to avoid the tower itself, swirling in a circle around it like a beast pacing its cage. And around 2:17 a.m., I heard the distant moan of the lens mechanism upstairs, machinery I knew had no power turning as if lit from within, casting light in smooth, slow arcs that illuminated nothing but deep black beyond the cliffs. And when I climbed the stairs to see how this was possible, I found the lens dripping with salt water, the floor slick, and the names on the railing had doubled. Some now included mine, scratched into the metal without my knowledge. On the third night, things changed, subtly at first, like time stuttering, or rewinding in brief, nauseating bursts, where I'd pour a glass of water only to see the pitcher full again a moment later, or hear my own voice whispering from another room, repeating things I'd said hours before, and then more overtly. Like when I looked into the cracked mirror above the sink and saw not my reflection, but an older version of me, gaunt and covered in barnacles, sobbing with rage, mouthing the words, "Don't blink." And from then on, every time I blinked, something moved: a chair, a shadow, a figure just beyond the stairwell, well ways closer. When my eyes reopened on the fourth day, I stopped going upstairs, because every time I neared the top, my ears would bleed, and the lens would spin violently, even though there was no power, casting screaming arcs of light that didn't light anything, but seemed to erase pieces of the world they touched, leaving parts of the room pitch black. Even when flashlight, I tried calling out on the emergency radio, but only received static, or worse, my own voice played back at me seconds before I spoke. Like the tower knew what I was going to say, and mocked me with it. And every night, I could hear voices in the wind, not howling, not words, but intoning, like monks underwater, chanting things that made my chest hurt and my mouth dry. And I knew I wasn't alone. Not even close. The fifth night, a man came down the stair stall, impossibly tall, his eyes reflective like glass, wearing a keeper's coat soaked with black seaweed, and he pointed at me without speaking, slowly lifting his arm until his finger aimed directly at my chest. And when I fled, locking myself in the storage closet, I found carvings on the walls made by previous visitors, dozens, maybe hundreds, desperate pleas, warnings, and what appeared to be a calendar marking the seventh night with circles, and the word devourer underlined so many times the wood was gouged by then. I realized there was a pattern. The seventh night was always the last anyone stayed, because something came then, something not from the sea, but beneath it, older than lighthouses, older than storms, something the structure had been built to trap or warn against, not protect from weather, but to keep it from wandering inland. And with each keeper that failed to maintain the rituals of which I knew none, the thing grew stronger, closer, more aware. By the sixth night, I couldn't tell if I was dreaming or awake, if I was still in the lighthouse, or inside some deeper, more symbolic version of it, because doors no longer led where they should, and when I tried to leave, the cliff paths simply looped back no matter what direction I walked, with the sky turning black before noon, and the stars appearing in strange, impossible constellations, and I could hear the stars net metaphorically saying, like crystal breaking underwater, and told me things about myself I had never shared, not even with my ex-wife, like the time I considered driving off a bridge, but didn't, because I felt bad for the car. And on the seventh night, the tower turned on itself, the walls slick with brine and ink, the stairs melting into one long throat of pulsating coral, and I heard the Capernaum, dozens of them speaking from within the stone, asking me why I had come without offering, without sacrifice, and the tower wanted me to answer, to serve. Because that's what all lighthouses want, not to guide ships, but to signal the old ones, to feed. And I realized the light wasn't a beacon for sailors, but a lure for the hungry deep. In the final moments, I recorded a message on my phone, something I don't remember doing but found later in my saved files, where my voice says, "If you see the light, it's already seen you," and then just static. Though in the background, slowed and distorted, is my own scream, looped like a siren. I don't remember leaving. I just woke up 3 miles inland on the sand, clothes dry, phone at 1%, and a sharp pain behind my ear, where I later discovered a tiny shell embedded beneath the skin, which I can't remove. And when I sleep now, I dream of the tower, and sometimes I am the tower, looking outward into the sea, with something ancient inside me, turning hungry and awake. If this story sent chills down your spine, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who dares to listen in the dark. Drop a comment below if you've ever felt something watching you when you were completely alone. Until next time, keep your lights on.